All right. Hello, everybody. We are live. Is everybody out there? If you can hear me, let me know in the chats, in the chat messages. This is our weekday Hot Topics live chat number 6. How is everyone doing out there? Let's see. We got people from Dover, Venezuela, Northern California, Arizona, Italy. All right, Arizona. I used to live in Arizona. Very cool. North Wales, Canada, Athens, Greece, Tanzania, Toronto. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? I have with me today, so we can get this live chat started. I have from Moscow, host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle.
Good to be with you,
Peter. All right. And we have from London, the Oracle of London, editor-in-chief of the Duran, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Hello, Alexander. How are you?
I'm very well, and Christmas greetings to all of yours.
That's right. I hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas and good holidays, and I hope everyone is getting ready for the new year. And let's see, we got Netherlands, Australia, Cape Town, Wisconsin, England, Scotland, Singapore, Melbourne, Denmark, England, UK. Hello to everyone. All right. Love you, Poland. Love you, Poland. Thank you for showing up to the chat. Guys, I think the Christmas news is pretty focused right now, and I would say it's a lot about Syria. The mainstream media freak out over Syria. The warmongers on the both left and the right have combined forces to now go after Trump with regards to his pullout from Syria. Trump showed up yesterday in Iraq, and he paid the troops a surprise visit, and of course the media was not happy with that either. And so let's get going on Syria. But before we get to Syria, we have one question from Pietro on Assange. Peter, it was the first question, actually, on one of the first questions on the live chat. Peter, can Trump help Assange?
No, he won't. He won't get involved in it at all. What we all knew at the time during the campaign when Trump said, "I love WikiLeaks," remember that? Okay, it was that's his humor, okay? It was hurting Hillary Clinton, his opponent. But those words haunt him right now. And so he's, more than anything else, he's has the FBI and the State Department doubling down. I mean, there's no mercy for Julian Assange. None. Zero. There's no way out for him, unfortunately. The only thing that could help, that could make a difference, if journalists spoke up for him. But they're not. The political system, the political classes, the foreign policy blob, they're all united in this. The only difference could be the media, but they're just pliant tools of the political classes. So I'm sorry, every question about Julian Assange ends up being answered the same way.
Yeah. Alexander, you have anything quickly to add before we move on to the big topic?
I am completely in agreement with Peter. If Donald Trump, I don't know what Donald Trump personally thinks about Assange, but if he tried to help Assange at the moment, he would lose the support of the Republicans in the Senate. He would be at serious risk of impeachment. Can I say very simply, looking at the Mueller investigation, the last trick that Mueller is trying to play is trying to link Donald Trump and his campaign team to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks. This is why they went off against Jerome Corsi. This is why they've gone off against Roger Stone. They're trying now to create a collusion claim between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign in substitution for the collusion that they couldn't prove between the Trump campaign and the Russians. If Donald Trump acts now to try and protect Assange, he will be acting as if he is proving that. That is what they will say, and his support in the Congress will collapse. So there is no prospect of that happening, and we should put that idea entirely to one side. As to what Peter said about the journalists, he is absolutely right, but if you look at the media here in Britain, the journalists are amongst Julian Assange's most bitter enemies, and that is the horrible reality of it.
Yes, because Trump would be, the charge again, if he were to intervene on the behalf of Julian Assange, it would be obstruction of justice.
Exactly.
And actually, that's provable, I suppose. But as I constantly reiterate here, impeachment is a political process, okay? And so an article of impeachment can be anything, and if it gets support in Congress and then goes to the Senate to be voted on. It's a political process. And Donald Trump, if he were to make some kind of gesture towards Julian Assange about his legal predicament in the United States, then, and probably legally true, in a legal sense, it would be true. I mean, he shouldn't be doing that, okay? Yeah. But he could use as a bully pulpit, but that's a little bit different, but certainly would be interpreted as the same way. We can finish off by saying, did Mueller actually interview Julian Assange? No, okay? So you know these people are not, they're not serious in getting to the truth. They're not serious about justice. Their only goal is to prove some kind of Trump connection to the Russians. And there's only one thing that can really do it: WikiLeaks, which I don't believe, okay?
Dragon Energy says Orange Man turned up in Iraq, Orange Man bad. So basically anything Orange Man does is going to be construed as bad. If he shows up to Iraq, it's bad. If he doesn't show up to Iraq, it's bad. This, I think, is the narrative, and this kind of dovetails from Assange to Syria and what's going on in Syria, and the fact that Trump is pulling out of Syria, or so it seems that he's pulling out of Syria. We also had the Israelis attacking Syria on Christmas Day, and a lot of people in the chat are wondering what's going to be Trump or the U.S.'s reaction to that, and what's going to be Russia's reaction to that, if any. So we have a lot of people from Chicago, Istanbul, from Scotland, from DC, from the Netherlands. Thank you for everyone to join us. Thank you to everyone for joining us here. Remember, guys, also click that notifications button, share the channel with everybody you know, and we still have 20% off all merchandise on the Duran shop. So go and buy a shirt. It really helps out a lot. Alexander, what's the update on Syria? A lot of stuff in the news on Syria.
Huge
pullouts. What's going on there, and how do you see things unfolding, especially given that Israel did attack Syria under the guise of attacking Iran forces embedded in Syria? What's the latest there?
Indeed. I mean, the Israeli attack is a major event because it's the first big Israeli attack on Syria since the S-300s were delivered to Syria from Russia. And I mean, what they show, and it's important to stress this, is the thing that we've been saying on the Duran right from the start, that the S-300s do not establish a Russian no-fly zone over Syria. They were never intended to do that. That's not what that deployment is all about. And anybody who has that illusion should put that aside. What it shows, again, is that now that the US is pulling out of Syria, the Israelis are becoming increasingly assertive again, because they feel that they have to somehow redress the balance in Syria, which is shifting against them. And they're becoming increasingly reckless. If you go onto the Duran, we provided a link to an article from Sputnik, which cites the Russian General Staff, which shows that the Israelis apparently carried out this raid by hiding behind two commercial airliners. Now, this is a very bad situation. It can only lead to worse things if it continues. There were apparently staff discussions, military staff discussions between the Israelis and the Russians some days ago in order to try to come to some sort of arrangement whereby Israeli strikes on Syria will be administered or managed in some way so as to avoid this kind of thing. But we will see what those lead up to. In the meantime, Israel is going through an election cycle. Netanyahu's position in Israel is very brittle. He's got the Americans pulling out of Syria. So, given that that is the situation, it is not surprising that he is looking to Syria to escalate the situation there, both to reassert Israeli power and to shore up his own domestic position at home. The other big news, if I may say so very quickly, is that tomorrow, apparently a huge Turkish delegation is going to go to Moscow to discuss Syria. The foreign minister, the Turkish foreign minister, will be there. The chief of the general staff will be there. There will be military talks. There will be diplomatic talks. They will be looking at the constitutional thing. It's quite clear that neither the Turks nor the Russians were expecting this pullout by the US, which Trump announced, and they're now rushing to try and work out what they're going to do and to make sure that the lines of communication between them are still working and that they each know what the other is doing and to some extent agree to what the other is doing. So lots going on, both on the diplomatic front, both on the military front. Situation remains very unstable.
It's very interesting. All through the Western media, on the foreign policy blob, the U.S. abandons the Kurds. Okay, that is one of the memes out there. Even Noam Chomsky chimed in on that. I mean, that guy hasn't said anything worth listening to for a long time. But what's interesting here is that with this delegation coming to Moscow, who ends up being the advocate of the Kurds? The Russians. Okay. And so what they're going to want, what they've been pushing for a while now, is a reconciliation process, not with the Turks, but with the Syrian government. And I think this is an amazing opening for this to happen, because Russia does have the leverage, it has the diplomatic skill, and it understands what's going on in the country, unlike the Americans. So I think this is I don't think Turkey, and maybe Mark can talk about this on Sunday, but I see there's a lot more hesitation on the part of Erdogan to go further into the country, because that was his bluster. It wasn't policy. And now it's like, we better get to Moscow and talk about this. Yeah. Because Erdogan doesn't want a general war. What he wants is that with the three-way Mexican standoff, he had a lot of wiggle room. Now he has to face reality. So this is a very interesting opening. And going back to the Israeli strike, first of all, it was quite despicable to hide behind commercial airlines. I mean, really, this is beyond outrageous. So many lives were at stake. But the Israelis are basically, as Alexander Mercouris said, is that, we're still here, and we still have a lot of control over the air. We don't have, it's dissipating through time, but they still have a lot of air power, and they put it on display. I don't believe in going after Iranian force. This is this myth that they keep pushing, okay? The Israelis wanted to make a point, and obviously the point was the Americans are out, but we're still here. And through over the last couple of years, you've seen the Kurds as being somewhat of an Israeli project. That will probably dissipate as well. The Russians come in there because I think the Kurds would much prefer to use the Russians as a advocate in dealing with the Syrian government. Remember, all through this war, the Kurds and the Syrians hardly touched each other. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And all the doom and gloom in Washington, it's just bad fiction. No one's talking about facts. They're just it's just more virtue signaling that Donald Trump is fiddling with our empire. Keep in mind, Trump's public opinion poll numbers went up after the announcement. His base said yes. You said you were going to pull out. You've done it. Check. Promise kept. Don't underestimate the domestic angle when Trump is thinking about these things.
Absolutely.
William Poole sent a message on the chat, and I also got a message on RT saying that Syrian troops did enter Manjib and raised a flag there literally an hour or two ago. What does this mean, Alexander?
Yeah.
The war is not over, and it is still going on, correct?
No, it's not over. It's move and counter move. If Syrian troops are entering Manbij, it is intended, I think, to keep the Turks out. And it may be a sign that the Syrians are working towards, are trying to sort of come to some kind of arrangement with the Kurds of the kind that Peter is talking about. Can I just say a few things, actually? Peter's absolutely right. I mean, in a sense, Erdogan's bluff has been called by Donald Trump. I mean, it was, he never really expected that he'd be able to send his armies east of the Euphrates in any massive way. He never really planned to take on ISIS. And now suddenly he's been told, well, yes, you can. And of course, he's not ready for it. So he's rushing off to Moscow, he's sending all these people off to Moscow to try to find some kind of a solution there. In the meantime, as I said, as Peter absolutely rightly says, the Kurds and the Syrians, they've got talks to do to each other. The Kurds have always had a friend in Moscow. So again, it's quite likely we will be seeing a diplomatic initiative by the Russians trying to pull all these pieces together, trying to find something that will save Erdogan's face and enable him to come away and say that he secured gains for Turkey and that he's playing a major role in Syria, and which at the same time will advance the project of Syrian reintegration and of providing some sort of protection to the Kurds. In terms of the political and diplomatic process, to be absolutely clear about it, all roads lead through Moscow, and the information that there may be now Syrian troops in Manbij may be a sign of that. You know, on the day before, as I said, this very high-powered Turkish delegation is due to go to Moscow to talk about these things. I would just add one other thing on the diplomatic front, which is, of course, we're now seeing the Arab states, now moving to reconcile with Syria, which is a very big event. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia's closest ally in the Middle East, has just reopened its embassy in Damascus, and there's apparently talk that Syria is going to be rejoining the Arab League. So the Arab states, Saudi Arabia and its friends, MBS and his friends, they do not want to see a powerful Turkey entrenched in Syria, supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, which the Saudis detest for all sorts of other reasons. And of course, with the Khashoggi affair, the Saudis have their own issue with the Turks. So lots going on, complicated situation as always, but as Peter rightly says, all the keys lie in Moscow. We will see how the Russians turn them.
Peter, you mentioned a little bit about the media's kind of play on the Kurds and that they're using the Kurds now, you know, that Trump abandoned the Kurds, save the Kurds. All of a sudden, the United States is very, very interested in the Kurds. What do you make of the media's reaction to Trump's pullout? I mean, on my opinion is that we've seen Trump has exposed, whether he intended to or not, he's exposed the warmongers on the left, on the right, in the mainstream media, at MSNBC, at CNN. I mean, everyone has come together for war. You've said it many, many times that the Russiagate affair is not something that may impeach Trump, but the fact that he is trying to dismantle American empire may be his undoing. Go into that a little bit, Peter.
No, I may have my figures wrong here, but I mean, the United States has 40,000 troops in and around the Gulf area. Okay, so 2,000 of them plus are going to be moved out. Maybe private contractors will be replacing. I mean, I know Eric Prince is snooping around, but you know, empire is the glue that keeps the various elements of the political class together. That's what keeps them together. Okay, they can disagree on the wall. They can disagree on taxes. They can disagree on immigration. They don't disagree on empire. That is what keeps them together. And Trump is breaking the rules in their mind. And it's worth thinking about, you know, pulling out of Syria, downsizing in Afghanistan. Look, Trump's visit to Iraq, I don't know all of the diplomatic details, but I mean, the government there feels like they're still a colony of the United States. I mean, Trump just kind of drops into the military base there, but he screwed up, or his people screwed up, all of the protocol. And so the government is really angry because Trump said, well, just come on over to the base. But he didn't understand that for the prime minister to go to the American base, it's like, you know, like calling the waiter over, okay? And they couldn't do it, all right? And then the government came, the Iraqis came together here, and see, the empire thinking is that, well, we can do whatever we want. I mean, I remember an analyst on Crosstalk told me, he said the American Navy should be able to go anywhere in the world anytime it wants. That's imperial thinking, all right? Mm. And so Trump tinkering with this that sets off the ultimate red flag. It's going over the red line that it is not conceivable for people I mean, we here been advocating this for years. That's why our audience is here, okay? Because once it starts, and let me throw this in too, Congress is now beginning to rethink its war powers acts, okay? And in regard to Libya, Yemen. And if they are successful, and remember the Democrats are going to have controlling the House, if it's one way to needle Trump, they'll go for it. So they will push back empire for very different reasons than we would think, okay? But this imperial thinking is the glue that keeps it all together. And once you start unraveling it, it can unravel rather quickly. Look at the American debt, okay? This is getting really out of control. Paying for this imperial, this empire the U.S. is living beyond its means when it comes to empire.
Alexander, we touched a little bit on Russiagate, and there's a question here which I find very interesting from Brad Oland. And we're talking how Russiagate probably won't be, the Russia hoax won't be the undoing of Trump, but we see a lot of people missing in the Russia hoax. And they're using it, obviously, they continue to use it against Trump, the media. One of the people that we've always mentioned in our chats is Susan Rice, and Brad Oland wants to know, where is Susan Rice? What happened to Susan?
Well, that's a very good
question. The liar of Benghazi, by the way. And we mentioned Steele, we mentioned Susan Rice, we mentioned Loretta Lynch, mentioned a lot of people. All these people are all part of the whole Russiagate hoax.
Indeed, sir. I mean, the Susan Rice, it was, of course, the National Security Advisor at the time. She was in charge of the National Security Council. She was the conduit between Barack Obama and the intelligence agencies, which were carrying out this campaign at that time against Donald Trump. So Susan Rice was right at the center of all of this. She has kept a very low profile ever since. But there are very, very strong rumors that she was central to this so-called unmasking. In other words, to this littering.
She lied about on American television, just like Benghazi lied. They caught her in a lie. They did release the fact that she unmasked things. Keep going.
Exactly. So I mean, this is the key. That this is littering all the names of all these people who were involved in Donald Trump's campaign, so that across the bureaucracy, so that it would be possible, it would be easy to find out who they were, which is a disgraceful thing. Now, if there is ever a proper investigation into what actually happened in 2016, why there were all these investigations launched, both before and during the election and after the election, into the Donald Trump campaign, why there was the systematic attempt to claim that Donald Trump was somehow the Siberian candidate acting for the Russians, why all those illegal surveillance was going on, why all these provocation techniques were being used in London and in other places to try to incriminate the Trump campaign into something that they were not doing, which was colluding with the Russians. If we ever get into a proper investigation, Susan Rice is obviously going to be one of the people who those investigators will be coming to for questions. And at that point, I think we will get some very interesting answers, and we will see exactly how very big her role was. But at the moment, because no one in authority is asking those questions, there is no investigation of any of that going on. The media is obviously not asking those questions because it is entirely anti-Trump and pro-Democrat, with just a very few exceptions. Susan Rice is able to hide, and that's what she's doing.
Yeah, Pat Patterson's election rigged by the DNC. What do you think of that, Peter?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's something that it is all known. I mean, you know, this is what for me that's so interesting. Ever since WikiLeaks exposed or released those emails, is that the mainstream is just outraged that they were released, but they're not concerned in the slightest in the contents of those things. Okay, I'm interested in it. And it's there for anyone to see. I mean, go to the WikiLeaks site. You can see Bernie Sanders was the primary was stolen from him. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, and there are plenty of I know people that were pro Bernie that are so angry about this to this day that they actually support Trump. Can you believe that? Really? they're so enraged that it was stolen from them, and the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it, and the Democratic Party itself, well, it doesn't really, minor details, these emails don't really mean anything. They're just, recipes and, pictures of grandchildren, and no, it's not. I mean, it was a fraud within the Democratic Party. Okay, if that's illegal, I don't know. That's a legal question, but certainly morally, they subverted the democratic process.
I would have thought it was illegal, Peter.
I looked at the case. I looked at the filings, and it's more of a private organization. Can you prosecute them in federal court for breaking their own bylaws? It's not black and white. I mean,
no,
you know much better than me, but
no, it never
I looked at it and said it's kind of flimsy case.
I'm not sure it's a flimsy case, actually. I would have thought there's actually a fairly concrete case there. But of course, the person who has to bring it is Bernie Sanders himself or his campaign, and he's shown no interest in doing so. And that, I think, is the problem. Coming back to your point, Peter, of course, Hillary Clinton was trying to rig the primaries, and she was trying to use her friends in the intelligence services to rig the election as well. She succeeded with the primaries. She failed with the election. But after that, we've had Plan B, which is, of course, to try to discredit Donald Trump by using all the material that was used to sort of rig the election against him, to try to rig the political system against him. And to a great extent, that succeeded. But I'm afraid 2016 was the most corrupt election in American history that I know of. You have to go all the way back.
You have to go all the way back to 18. What year was 1872? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because in that case, is that there was a rigged election. The Southerners said you can have the presidency, but radical Reconstruction went in. That was
Exactly. I mean, 1972, the so-called Watergate election, was nothing by comparison. And the fact that, as I said, the intelligence services of the United States were working on behalf of one candidate, Hillary Clinton, and against another, and were doing so at the behest, it seems, of the Democratic Party, which was at that time in government. I mean, Obama obviously was a Democrat. That is incredibly frightening and extremely worrying. And it is shocking that the US media, which calls itself sometimes the fourth estate, which supposedly is there to protect free speech and democracy and all these things, has been an active co-conspirator in this affair. That is really, really worrying, and any American should be worried about it.
They should be worried about it, because if we go back to Watergate, the evidence is clear. The historical record is clear. Nixon wanted to get the CIA in to help clean up the mess of the plumbers. Okay, so just tell them it was a national security thing. And the CIA, which I very rarely have anything good to say, they said, no way, we're not getting involved in this. Okay, and then you had when the Supreme Court demanded that Nixon release the tapes. Nixon wanted the special prosecutor Archibald Cox fired, okay, and then at the FBI and at the DOJ they said no, we're not going to fire anyway. And then you have the resignation. It got Bork. That's how Bork became on the national scene. Later, he would fail to become a Supreme Court justice. My point in saying all this is that the system did have some checks and balances. Okay, now it's completely out of control.
Yeah, that is exactly.
The worst thing about it is that we know about it. We know about it, and nothing is being done about it. That's what's
exactly. I mean, the political system was working in 1972. The number of people who were involved in the Watergate scandal was a very small group of people inside the Nixon White House. The 2016 election, it was the entire US government was involved in it. And anybody comparing the two scandals can see that one is on an entirely different scale to the other.
Giuliani lashed out at the Mueller investigation. He lashed out at Mueller, calling for another special counsel or a special investigation into the missing messages, about 19,000 of them, missing text messages between Strzok and Lisa Page. those have been erased. They've been scrubbed. I think it's about 3-4 months of messages have somehow just disappeared. And supposedly, from what I understand, what Giuliani was saying, they've disappeared under the orders of Mueller. What do you guys make of that? And also, I want to hear your guys' take on a Jimmy Dore show where he highlighted Hillary Clinton's tweet where she was attacking Trump on his pullout from Syria, saying that actions have consequences. That, I thought, was incredible to see Hillary Clinton surface once again and attack Trump on pulling out of Syria. Hillary Clinton, who, of course, destroyed Libya and who was responsible for getting the weapons from Libya into Syria to begin the conflict. So, guys, have at it. One on Giuliani and the other on Hillary Clinton.
Giuliani one. I'll be real quick because I don't want. We try to stay away from too. We deal with facts here. So I know Giuliani has made these claims here. Did Mueller have them erased? We don't know that. However, there's something called the NSA, and it has a humongous budget. I would say to the NSA, if you can't find those erased emails, then why are you in existence? What's your purpose? Okay? They should be easily found, okay? Just like the NSA would have known or could have found out if someone had transmitted the Podesta emails to WikiLeaks. They could find that. There would be a forensic scientific trail left behind. No one except for people like ourselves, Robert Perry, God bless his soul, he passed away last year, wrote extensively on this. So did Ray McGovern and others at Veeps. Okay, so I think that's done there. Do you want to do the Hillary Clinton thing here? I mean, neither one of us want to talk about her, but we're being...
No, you guys, I want to talk about her because...
No, absolutely. No, I'm absolutely happy to talk about Hillary Clinton.
Because I find, you guys mentioned about the mainstream media, about everyone piling on to Trump because he pulled out of Syria.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's getting out of a conflict. He's getting out of a war.
Yeah.
And everyone is against it, including, once again, Hillary Clinton, who is the leader.
Yeah.
I believe she still is the leader.
Absolutely. She is technically the leader of the Democratic Party. People
it's not the Democratic Party, it's the Clinton mafia
clan. I know, but anyway, but there it is. Can I just quickly though cover what Peter said? I have been arguing that special counsel should be appointed to look into all of these things that we've been talking about, the illegal surveillance, the wiretapping, what actually happened during the 2016 election for over a year. Robert Mueller obviously is not the person to be special counsel in this case, because as the former director of the FBI, it is quite clear that his primary agenda is to protect the FBI. He has far too much of a conflict of interest to be carrying out this investigation. It should be someone else, preferably, I think, a judge who has understanding of evidence and who can look into these things. Hillary Clinton, well, here she comes again. She won't go away. She is constantly jumping in onto every anti-Trump bandwagon that she can. I have a feeling that she's still hoping that she's going to be running in 2020, in which case I'm sure that is an answer to Donald Trump's prayers. But we shall see. What she is saying is, of course, absolutely wrong. And as Alex Christoforou absolutely rightly says, it is, of course, the consensus of the Washington foreign policy establishment, of which Hillary Clinton, to be absolutely clear, has been the faithful spokesman. She has always supported every interventionist war that's ever been fought. She supported the war against Yugoslavia in 1999. She supported the invasion of Iraq in 2003. She was the principal organizer of the war against Libya, which she has always tried to row back from. And of course, she wants to see the intervention in Syria go on. And during the election, she was talking about no-fly zones. She was talking about escalation. She was talking about a confrontation in Syria, risking a clash with the Russians. And it was one of the central reasons why the American people didn't elect a president. She has learned nothing from it. She continues to be the elitist person who sides with the establishment against the people that she always was.
I think also is that she just wants to remain relevant. I think that's her worst nightmare. Is I mean, look at that speaking tour she went on with Bill. It was a complete disaster. I mean, an embarrassment. You know, they're basically giving tickets away into empty halls. I don't know. Did they? I think they canceled it or they trimmed it down. She's worried about not being relevant anymore, and she also, the Clinton money machine, the Clinton dirty money machine. They're always looking for a way to scam, and you know, they got a lot of favors to pay back. She was supposed to win, remember? And she took a lot of loans, quote unquote, and she's got to pay a lot of stuff back.
All right, Peter, Vlada wants to know if you think that Hillary will ever get what she deserved, i.e. will she ever face an investigation of her own, or is she just going to walk away from everything? Let's not forget that it was Hillary Clinton, Robbie Moog, Podesta that have also sprung this whole Mueller investigation on us. I mean, they're the principals of the 13 intelligence agencies that said Trump colluded with Russia and all this stuff. I mean, this was launched by the Clinton campaign.
Yep, in Brooklyn, right after the election. We know that. Read the book, Shattered. It's all of it's in there. It's an excellent. If you don't want to read it, it's on YouTube. You can listen to it. To be blunt, yeah, I think she'll walk. She'll skate through this. She'll always have plausible deniability. The Clintons throw everyone under the bus. They'll throw Mook under the bus. Oh, I wasn't at that conversation. He misunderstood me. You got to remember something about the Clintons. It's very interesting about them. They're both trained lawyers. So they understand sleights of hands, change of words. In the vernacular, a specialist wouldn't really understand. But they always make sure there's some kind of legal glean over it, okay, to get them through. I mean, I think Uranium One is a perfect example of that. And you know, people that say, you know, Hillary couldn't have done it all on her own. The entire cabinet signed off on it. And I draw the exact opposite conclusion. It means everybody was in on it, okay? Everybody did what she wanted to do because she was going to be the next president of the United States. So I think if they had a concerted effort, I think they could get the mooks and people like that, you know, low-lying fruit. Would they ever go after Hillary and Bill like that? The establishment is... They're so corrupt. The establishment is so corrupted by the Clinton world that I don't think that there would be enough gumption on the part of the establishment and the media to go after them. I mean, some of these things are so glaringly obvious about pay to play, and no one wants to investigate it. It's very frustrating. You know, you have General Flynn, and I'm not a big supporter of the general, but he was railroaded. He was really railroaded. And George Papadopoulos, I mean, who are these people really? So my prediction is, since Trump doesn't care what people in the establishment think, I think that, I don't know about Manafort, but I think Flynn will get a pardon. And I think a lot of legal people will say, yeah, he got a raw deal. And Papadopoulos, a raw deal too. He was entrapped. And so, you know, it really is painful to see these low-level figures have their whole lives destroyed, and the people at the very top running these operations. You know, look at Jim Comey. I mean, he just lies in public all the time. You know, and here, Jim Comey, the stellar FBI G-man. How many times did he say, I don't remember in front of Congress? It was only a year ago, dude. You don't remember? We're not asking you a Kavanaugh question of 37 years ago. We're talking 18 months ago. I don't remember. No, to answer the question, I don't think she'll ever be held to account for her actions. Illegal and immoral actions.
Alexander, we're focusing a lot on the U.S.'s reaction to Trump's pullout in Syria and how a lot of the U.S. is, the media and the politicians are attacking Trump pretty much 24/7. But one thing that really stuck with me was the European reaction as well to Trump's pullout of Syria. Macron also ramped up his rhetoric that he's going to remain in Syria, and he also once again doubled down on the EU army thing. there's a lot of people in the chat that were asking about the yellow vests, what's going on there in France, and also what's going on with France's position towards Syria. Is Macron for real, or is he just, just talking just bullshit?
Yeah. He's talking bullshit is the short answer. The idea that France can go by can take on the Russians and the Turks all by itself without the United States is absolute nonsense. I mean, what's happening with the yellow vests in France is it's Christmas. Macron has made various concessions. It is to be expected that the protests would loosen steam over Christmas. We will see whether they will regather momentum when the holidays end back in January. The important thing to say is that Macron's spell of invincibility in France has collapsed. He is now, I think, the most unpopular president of the Fifth Republic. I think he's even plumbing Hollande's levels of unpopularity. So he is a very diminished and weakened figure in French politics. And of course, he's trying to do what he's always done. He tries to pose as this great champion of France, of internationalism, of the neoliberal, neo-global order. And he's trying to make out that France is an important player in Syria, which, to be absolutely clear, France is not an important player in Syria. It no longer has the power to be. The French people have no desire for it to be. And Macron interfering in Syria in this way is going to go down very badly with the people of France, and is one of the reasons why so many people have been protesting against him. So I mean, that's where we stand.
Well, I think Macron's Syria posture is just a posture. It's bluster because it's anti-Trump. Okay, I mean, this is what we've seen for 2 years. Nominally intelligent people do and say stupid things. Yeah. Just it has to be the opposite. Okay, I mean Macron, and I don't think. He doesn't strike me as much of a foreign policy guy, but he certainly didn't think it through. He just wanted to beat his little chest there and say that, France is a great global power. And no, it's not. Okay. Yeah, it does continue to meddle in Africa. Yeah. All right. In maniacal ways like that. But in Syria, if the U.S. is not there, they're going to pack their bags anyway. So just ignore the rhetoric.
Yes, I see. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that Macron is actually particularly intelligent. I mean, what Macron is, he is a middle-level technocrat, somebody who had just achieved some sort of cabinet position, ministerial position in France. He was then leveraged very fast into the French presidency before he was tested properly and before he had developed that level of political intelligence which every politician needs to succeed. He doesn't have that kind of political intelligence. He doesn't understand popular opinion in France very well. He understands Davos opinion, the opinion of the elites, which is the opinion that he has been involved with. But I think talking about intervening in Syria, harping on about this European army, it is exactly the wrong things to be saying at this time. And as I said, it is not the actions of a clever politician. And I'm not convinced that Macron is one.
Alexander, Paul wants to know, Alex, do you think Macron's ego has him thinking he is relevant in Syria? So do you think it's an ego thing for Macron as well?
Absolutely. Of course he is. I mean, Macron wants to be. Peter was talking about Hillary Clinton wanting to be at the center of the attention. With Macron, that is an illness. He is obsessed with it. He is the person who talked about, compared himself with Jupiter and Napoleon and all these absurd comparisons, and who lectured Putin on Peter the Great and Russian history. And of course, he now wants to pose as the great champion of the Kurds and the great champion of the Syrian people and the great player. France is the great player in Syria. And none of it is true. I mean, it's nonsense. But I mean, he would be far better advised spending the holidays thinking about what is going so wrong for him in France than wasting his time making these absurd comments about Syria, which cannot help him politically. But there we are. He is both vain and politically foolish.
Peter, let's shift gears a little. Kilo Rosa wants to know, what do you think about a Ukrainian offensive against Donbass this winter? Do you think that's something that might be coming up?
At least rhetorically, of course. What is happening right now is that it is a very slow process of what the Ukrainian forces are doing. They're stealing village after village in the gray zone that separates Donbass from Ukraine proper. And the Ukrainians are pushing. They're taking over villages here and there, and it's rather there's gunfire across the new border all the time. I don't think that Poroshenko would have a full-scale invasion. It would be a disaster for the Ukrainians, and a lot of people in the Donbass would get killed. But Poroshenko is going to continue wearing his uniform and marching around on TV and everything and talking about war with Russia. But I don't see it going that far. I doubt if he was really serious about it. I would be really curious how many soldiers on his side would actually be willing to fight. That's always been the problem there. Okay, always been a problem. That's one of the reasons why they had security forces on those two ships that violated Russia's territorial waters. They had security guys on there armed to make sure the guys on the boats would actually do what they were told to do. So if you're going to have these right-wing fanatic neo-Nazi battalions at the lead, maybe, but the rank and file, I mean, the last time they tried an offensive, the Ukrainians were slaughtered. I mean, literally. We don't even know the numbers.
Alexander, Pat Hacker makes an interesting comment. He says, what else do the Ukrainians have to do? Unemployment up, GDP down. Take us a little bit into what's going on with the economy in Ukraine. I know they just got approved for another IMF tranche. I forgot the amount, 4.9 billion or the amount there. But from what I understand, it's just meant to keep the economy afloat just a little bit so that there's not another Maidan type of event or the economy doesn't collapse. So take us a little bit into the economics of Ukraine right now.
You're quite right. It is to keep these IMF loans are intended to keep the thing, if not ticking along, then to prevent it ticking down slowly. The fundamental problem with Ukraine is that it is a rich country. Ukraine has, in theory, powerful industries, enormously rich agricultural land, an educated and well-trained population. It should be doing well. It is not doing well because it is being managed so badly. Now, all the things that Poroshenko has done over the last few months, this attempt to stage a provocation in the Sea of Azov, the fighting in the Donbass, which is sort of creeping along, the talk of a war with Russia, all of this has a terrible effect on what is left of the Ukrainian economy. Economic links between Ukrainian businesses and Russia are vital for those businesses to continue. Russia remains incredibly Ukraine's single biggest trading partner, its single biggest investor. But of course, Poroshenko is constantly trying to close this down. He's trying to, his actions in the Kerch Strait have essentially meant that Ukrainian ships, that ships no longer move to those Ukrainian ports, Mariupol especially, which are vital for Ukraine's export trade. So, and at the same time, he is manipulating, I don't think there's any question about the statistics, to conceal especially the rate of inflation. So what we are seeing in Ukraine is continued economic decline. Industry is slipping down. Apparently, over half the income that the population now gets is spent on buying food. The IMF is insisting that energy prices be liberalized, in other words, raised within Ukraine itself. And all this talk of war is hitting the economy even further. So it's a slow motion collapse, but that is what it is. It is a situation where Ukraine is gradually spiraling down. The IMF can prevent it all going bust at one go. It can't turn the situation round whilst the political system remains as dysfunctional as it is.
And we don't even really know. This will be, I'm sure that a lot of people will ponder about what I'm about to say. We don't even know the remittances that former Ukrainian citizens working in Russia are sending to Ukraine.
Peter, we don't know what the true rate of inflation is in Ukraine because people don't really believe the statistics anymore. We don't know how big the population is because the last census was made almost 20 years ago, and there's never been a proper accounting of the number of people who've left the country. We are working to some extent in a fog. What economic figures we have are bad and show a declining situation, but it is very difficult to get an exact handle of it. And of course, as I said, these moves that you were talking about on the Donbass front, and of course this crisis on the Sea of Azov, which Poroshenko has himself created, are making the situation worse.
Peter, is the EU, as Bennett wants to know, is the EU still promising Ukraine membership? What's going on there?
They've never promised it membership.
Never promised membership. Association agreement.
Yes.
That's what.
Yes.
That's the full extent right now. I mean, go ahead, Alexander. Go ahead.
I mean, it's not going to happen in any foreseeable future. I mean, I'm not talking about 5-10 years time, but at the moment, no appetite in Europe for bringing in Ukraine. The Ukraine has never been promised membership. Certain Ukrainian politicians associated with the Maidan movement, including, of course, Poroshenko, persist in pretending that it is going to happen soon. And they persist in making the same claim about NATO. And they are lying to their own people about this. And they have been lying right from the start. It was not offered in 2013. The association agreement came along. It is not being offered now.
Agreed.
Peter, is the NATO issue, can you not make the argument that Ukraine is already de facto NATO?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, all but in a legal sense.
And going back to the EU accession, I was also reading that Germany is now saying that Turkey should kind of move away from an EU accession treaty. Is that true as well? Is the EU starting to collapse within itself?
I think that the Turkey's membership in the EU that train left the station a long time ago. I mean, I don't hear much about it anymore at all. I mean, what I see happening with the EU, not everybody in the EU hates the EU, folks, okay? It works for some, okay? Smaller countries, the low countries, okay? Germany. I would see possibly some kind of two-tier EU and then a two-tier euro. Now, I am not an economist, so I don't know exactly how that would work, but this over-centralization too quickly, this utopian thinking is a dead end. It is simply a dead end. I mean, I remember there was a poll. It comes out every once in a while, every year. How Russians feel about the Soviet Union, and the majority of Russians lament the end of the Soviet Union. But that same majority doesn't want the Soviet Union back. Okay, and so when it comes to this idea of the EU. First of all, it's not democratic. No one has ever asked Europeans if they want political union. The elites never come out and say it. They just say, we need more Europe. But that's what they mean. What they mean is, we want more of your sovereignty ceded to us, okay? And it's reached its limit. We see it all across Europe right now, and I think that's not the only issue of the Yellow Vest. The Yellow Vest movement is very complicated, but I think it's very fair to say it is rejection of this globalist order that the EU has created for the continent, and it's time for a reassessment. Unfortunately, the Brussels clan mafia, they don't have a plan B. They never have. You must concede. You must cede your sovereignty. That's the only way this is going to work for them in Brussels, but not you in the streets of Paris.
Alexander, what's your thought on this?
Well, if we go back to Turkey, I mean, that train has completely left the station. The German opinion is totally against it, and the Austrian government has ruled it out.
What about Turkey's thoughts on it? Has Erdogan come to the realization?
I think he has, actually. I think that Erdogan is increasingly looking to a Middle Eastern and Eurasian future for Turkey rather than an EU one, and that, frankly, is better for Turkey. I mean, this mirage of EU membership has created huge problems in Turkey ever since it was really first floated back in the 1960s. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's, I think, no longer believed in Turkey itself. I don't think Erdogan either believes it or actually really wants it. And I think it's over. And I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, the Austrian government, as I say, is totally opposed. Orban is also totally opposed. So is Poland, all of these countries. Now, as for what Peter said about the EU, I have to say something straightforwardly, which is these comparisons between the Soviet Union and the EU. As Peter rightly says, 66% of Russians say that they regret the passing of the Soviet Union. I do not believe if the EU collapsed tomorrow that in 25 years' time, 66% of Europeans would be regretting the EU. I mean, whatever one thinks of the EU now, and Peter's absolutely right, there are some people who are, winners from this. But I mean, this is such an unlikable institution at the moment. There is so little in it that one can really look to, which one can identify with, that I have to say, I think its powers of attraction are starting to diminish. We've just talked about Turkey. I think people within the EU itself are beginning to become increasingly restive about this. And I think, frankly, the whole thing is just losing traction on every side.
All right, let's go. Let's end the program. Oh, we lost Peter, I think. All right, Alexander, let's end the program the way we started it. Let's go back to Syria. And Jedi Mind wants to know, okay, Peter's coming back on. Jedi Mind would like to know, what's your thoughts on the SA-5 missiles? Russia and Syria have said that they will fire SA-5 missiles into Israel if Israel attacks again. Syria. Hello, Peter. Welcome back.
Right. Can I just?
We're talking about the SA-5 missiles, Peter, and the fact that Russia and Syria said that they will fire SA-5 missiles. Or I don't even know if it's confirmed. This is what we're reading, that there is this story floating around.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, can I just explain what the SA-5 is? That's the SAM-5. That is the NATO designation for S-200 missiles. These were supplied to Syria by the Soviet Union in the 1980s until the arrival of the S-300s, which, to be absolutely clear, is a far more sophisticated system than the S-200s. These SA-5s, these SA-200s, were the most sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles in Syria's arsenal. Syria has already used them to shoot down Israeli aircraft. They shot down an F-16 with them some months ago. I have absolutely no doubt that the Syrians will continue to use these missiles to defend their territory against Israeli air incursions. They've done so in the past with these missiles. I am sure they will do so again. I don't think we need confirmation from it. Where the situation will change radically is if the Syrians start using the far more sophisticated and far more powerful S-300 missile, which has just been delivered against the Israeli Air Force. That has not yet happened. We will see if it does happen. The Russians made it very clear that the S-300 missile had been supplied to the Syrians for a specific purpose, which is to provide air defense, additional air defense to the area of northwestern Syria, where the Russian air base and naval base is. So we will see if we start seeing S-300 missiles being brought closer to Damascus and being used to deter Israeli airstrikes there. I don't know. Can I just say one other thing about Syria, by the way, which we haven't touched on, which is I just wanted to talk about ISIS a moment, because, of course, the other people who people are saying are going to be saved by this American pullout are ISIS. The people who are doomed now, I have no doubt about this whatsoever, are ISIS. I think that irrespective of what the Israelis do in Western Syria, in and around Damascus, I think we are going to see important forces of the Syrian military moving into ISIS-controlled territory, that remnant of ISIS-controlled territory in eastern Syria, very soon, long before the Turks can get there. So I think we're going to see increasing increasing pressure between the Syrians and the Israelis in Western Syria, and we'll see what the Russians can broker over that. We will see what happens with the Kurds and the Turks and the Syrians in northern Syria, and we will see what the Russians achieve there. But I am confident that we will see the Syrian army advancing in eastern Syria against ISIS within the next few weeks, as soon as the US military pulls out. And I predict that that will be the end of ISIS, and we will probably see the end of the organization as it has existed up to now.
And I'd like to add, you know, and for me, it says everything about the illegal occupation of American forces in Syria. Why didn't they attack and destroy them? They didn't. They didn't. They had a different mission. Their mission was quagmire. And we'll see, as Alexander Mercouris just said, over the next few weeks, a problem that was been around for years now will be taken care of. It will be Syrians doing it, because the United States had really no interest whatsoever in attacking ISIS. They wanted to keep ISIS as a chess piece on the board. So, I mean, it's just really diabolical policy. It is. I'm so happy. I hope that there's not going to be another false flag chemical attack or some provocation. It's in the cards, folks. It's in the cards. But the system.
Do you think that's possible, the false flag, number one, Peter? Alexander, we'll end it on this last question. Number one, do you think there is a possibility for a false flag? Because everyone is kind of saying, okay, there's going to be a false flag, so we're going to know it's a setup.
There is a
talking about
very high.
But my second question on that is what you guys alluded to in the beginning of the program was that when those Israeli fighter jets were bombing Syria on Christmas Day, they were doing it with a commercial aircraft protecting them. And now you just talked about, Alexander, about the S-200s. And I kind of reference back to MH17 in that time period, where what would happen if those S-200s tried to fire upon those Israeli jets, and God forbid, something happens with a commercial aircraft. Is this a scenario that maybe Israel is trying to bait Syria into?
Yes,
so that everything, all the tension can get raised, and once again, the U.S. can step back in?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, false flags is a very high possibility. Let us be quite clear about this. Now that the situation of the jihadis and all of these people is becoming increasingly under pressure after we've had the US pull out, people who want to keep the US involved in Syria have a very powerful incentive to launch false flag chemical attacks. So we have to, unfortunately, keep an eye on that possibility. The one thing I would say quickly about this is that I think the Turks, seeing the US go, may not want to see that happen. And if they have any influence on the jihadis, they might try to prevent it, because that might interfere with their own diplomacy with Russia. But it is a very high possibility. As for what you were saying about MH17 and about the use of S-200 missiles and the possibility of a commercial airliner being shot down, can I say, Alex, in a sense, that is exactly what happened back in September. What happened was that the Israelis apparently used that Russian IL-20 surveillance aircraft to mask the movement of their own fighters as they were carrying out a strike on Syria. The Syrians retaliated by shooting at those fighters with S-200 missiles, the same missile that we've just been talking about. And that S-200 missile, instead of shooting down the Israeli fighters, shot down the Russian IL-20. Now, the Russians blamed the Israelis for this, which is, entirely understandable. If you look at the situation, you can clearly see who was at fault. If a commercial airliner is shot down, it will not just be the Russians, it will be a big international crisis. And of course, we can predict, as night follows day, that the Western powers will blame the Syrians and the Russians if a commercial airliner is shot down in that way, even though it was Israeli actions which might have caused it. So I'm afraid all of these scenarios are very real, and the Syrian conflict is not over yet. I mean, it is a step forward, perhaps, that the US is leaving, but there is still an awful lot that could go wrong, and we have to follow things very, very closely indeed. The one optimistic note I'm going to end on is, yes, I think ISIS is going to be destroyed very quickly, as I said, and I think the trajectory of this thing is now clear. I think whatever the Israelis do, whatever the jihadis do with false flag chemical attacks, Peter said, Trump's popularity increased in the US when US troops pulled out. I think that there will be little appetite from the American people to intervene in Syria again. I think Donald Trump understands that. And I think now the major players in the Syrian war who are left, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, and the Arab states, understand that the Syrian war has to be ended, and has to be ended on what will effectively be Russia's terms. The Israelis won't be happy, and they may try some spoilers, but I don't think in the end they have the power to do it.
Peter, we'll leave it with you to end it. Do you think that we're coming to a finality of the Syrian conflict? And we'll end it on your thoughts.
Well, the trajectory is there. And Alexander Mercouris used the word spoilers, and they're certainly on the table as well. But Donald Trump, he's already said he's made a big deal about getting out. I think he's going to invest a lot into getting out. I also think that it's akin to the Korean Peninsula. He's owned it. He's owned that process. He's going to want to see it come to fruition. He needs to get rid of Pompeo and Bolton. Those are potential spoilers that could be in play as well. I mean, I just wonder what was going through Bolton's head when he was on that telephone when Trump was talking to Erdogan. He said, "Can we get out? Yeah. Can we get out quickly? Oh, yeah. We're getting out quickly." Bolton must have thought, "What did I do?" So keep an eye on those two clowns, Bolton and Pompeo.
Yeah, it's a shame that Trump let those guys into his inner circle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bolton hugely overplayed his hand. He came along. He apparently promised Trump, when Trump appointed him, that he wouldn't start any wars. And sure enough, what did he do? He immediately set about trying to start wars. He was talking about keeping the US military in Syria indefinitely in order to create a quagmire for the Russians. And he was appointing all these hardliners like Ambassador Jeffrey to create the situation, make the situation in Syria even worse, and Ambassador Volker in Ukraine to make the situation even worse there. And of course, Trump, who has a completely different agenda and a base with completely different views, clearly wasn't happy. I think Bolton's days are numbered. That's my own view about it.
Yeah, he may quit. Okay, he simply may quit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there is a high chance that Bolton will quit. Pompeo, I'm not sure. I think Pompeo seems to be a lot more adaptable.
Yeah, he has presidential ambitions.
Yeah,
without a doubt. Without a doubt. All right, guys, let's wrap it up. We've been going for a little over an hour 10 minutes. Thank you to everyone who joined this live chat. Remember, on Sunday, we will have our big live chat, our 2-hour-long marathon live chat. We will have it on Sunday, right, guys?
Yes, yep. Absolutely.
All right, great. We will have our Sunday live chat. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this live chat. Thank you for all your questions. And remember, guys, subscribe, smash that like button, click that notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we do publish another video. Everyone, we hope you had a very good Christmas. We will do our last show for 2018 on Sunday, and then we will enter the new year, 2019. We hope everyone's having a very, very good holiday so far. Go to the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt, 20% off. We really appreciate all the help you guys give us. And hopefully we will see everybody on Sunday. Peter, any last words before we get moving on for the weekend and before our Sunday show?
Keep an eye on the Julian Assange story.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Alexander, Julian Assange.
I echo that. I mean, we have to. I mean, we absolutely have to. I mean, this is a very dangerous time for him.
All right. So our thoughts are with Julian Assange, and we will keep an eye out for that story. See you guys on Sunday. Everyone have a great weekend. Take care.